MAST at the moment and where I expect it to be in the near future. At the moment, of course, MAST only has data in it up to the end of 2021. And that, of course, is because the fundamental purpose of MAST is to stay up to step with the latest national releases of data from the Department for Transport. They used to do quarterly or half-yearly updates of the data, but for the last couple of years, DFT have chosen not to do that. Obviously, they are dependent on the data supply that they get from police forces and from the national governments within the UK in order to do that. So that means that MAST Online has to follow the DFT's update schedule. And if that update schedule is annual, as it is at the moment, then the data in MAST is also annual. But of course, publication of 2022, the latest complete year of national data, is just around the corner. Stats 19 release day should be a week on Thursday, the 28th of September. And unless something very surprising happens between now and then, on that day, the Department for Transport will publish reported road casualties Great Britain and will also publish the national data set that underlies that, and will also publish the statistical adjustment for injury for casualties whose severity has been reported but using injury-based reporting, which is something I'm going to come back and talk a bit more about later. So we're expecting that big download of data on, a week on Thursday on the 28th of September. And on the basis of that, these are our target dates for when we think MAST will be updated. The plan is that MAST and MAST data mods, about which more later, will be updated at some point during week commencing Monday, 16th of October. Not sure exactly what day during that week that will happen, but when it happens, we will send out an email to all MAST users confirming to you that that has happened. So at that point, MAST will then have data running up to the end of 2022. In the event that DFT do publish interim results during the course of the next year, so they may publish half-yearly data, or they may publish third quarter data, which is something that they have done in the past, then we will publish that information in MAST Professional, and we will inform in MAST Provisional, I should say, sorry, and we will inform everyone if that is the case. But we are dependent on the DFT for that. A difference, of course, is if you are in Scotland, then the data update cycle is a little bit different. The current target publication date for reported road casualties Scotland is Thursday, the 25th of October. And on the basis of that, we expect to update MAST Scotland at some point during week commencing Monday, 13th of November. Now, of course, users in Scotland have full access to MAST Online, containing the complete GB data set released by the Department for Transport. So users right across Britain will have full access to that as soon as it's updated. But MAST Scotland users will be able to see the data which exactly aligns to reported road casualties Scotland a few weeks later, assuming that the Scottish Government stick with their currently intended data release plan. So those are the key dates for MAST Online, Monday 16th October, and for MAST Scotland, week commencing Monday 13th November. The other product we maintain, of course, is MAST Professional, which has complete coverage of all contributory factors, going right back to the very beginning of the introduction of contributory factors in Stats 19, which goes back to 2006. That's MAST Professional. Now, MAST Professional takes a couple of weeks longer than MAST Online to update because of the sheer size of the contributory factor data set. Our target date for updating MAST Professional is Friday, the 27th of October. So if you use MAST to look at contributory factors, that's when that will be available. I know many MAST users also like using the headliners and the maps and the dashboards that come along with MAST. Some of those do use contributory factors, so our update schedule for those is the same as the update scheduled for MAST Professional. So our target is to get all of those updated by Friday the 27th of October. If we can do it any earlier, we will, but that's our latest by target date. So that gives you all an idea, I hope, about the update schedule of MAST and when we expect the data to be available. Before I move on from that, because I know obviously that's quite important, does anybody have any questions or comments about data and data updating generally? Because if so, this would be a good moment. Yes, Candice, hi there. Carry on.
Hi, it was just a quick question. I noticed the email last week, I think it was about Acorn. Is there a timeline for that coming in?
Yes, and you've given me a lovely segue into the next item in my agenda there, Candice. Yes, absolutely. The Acorn update will happen at the same time alongside um, the update of all the rest of MAST. So Acorn will be included in MAST in that timeline week commencing Monday 16th of October. That's our present plan. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else got any questions about data or anything before I move on from that? Okay. Right. So, as Candice's question just indicated, we do try and regularly review the features and updates of that MAST offers, because it's got a very big effect on the way that people are able to use Stats 19 data in order to get real insight into how to achieve casualty reduction. And MAST's USP has always been, to a significant extent, about understanding the demographics of the people involved in collisions rather than just always worrying about the tarmac. Now, historically, MAST has always done this using the Mosaic public sector socio-demographic classification system published by Experian. And of course, every driver and every casualty that there's ever been, going all the way back to 2006, is categorized against that socio-demographic classification system to give you an insight into what kinds of people are involved in various different ways in what kinds of crash. But we've been reviewing our use of socio-demographic data over the course of the last year, and we've reached a pretty big decision, which, as Candy said, we announced to everybody in an email last week, and which I'm going to tell you a bit more about now, and we'll be happy to have a discussion about it and answer questions about it now. We've decided to move from using Experian as our provider of socio-demographic classification to another corporate offering from Kaki, and their socio-demographic classification system is called Acorn. Now, Acorn is the same fundamental principle as Mosaic. That is, what they do is they collect a lot of data from many different sources. A lot of the base data, of course, comes out the census, but the census is just the starting point. They build lots of other data sources onto it as well. And then they use that data to categorize every individual household um, into the features that the people who live in that household have most in common with other similar households. And by doing that, they can classify every household in Great Britain and give you a lot of insight into what kind of people are represented within the different types of the taxonomy of the classification system. Now, this is very useful when we apply it to road safety data. And there was a couple of things about the way that Acorn does it that motivated us to change supplier and go with Acorn instead of Mosaic. And I just want to tell you what a couple of those things are. The first thing is that this new segmentation that Acorn have just released, and it's a brand new segmentation based on the 2021 census as a starting point, and then with this additional data added, is going to be in use for a number of years, because Acorn follow the census releases as their data cycle. So this is a brand new segmentation, and we'll be able to run with it consistently for a number of years into the future. We felt that that was a significant advantage, given how frequently the Mosaic taxonomy has changed. Another thing that we felt was very important was that Acorn has a wider range of metrics that are available about all of those different types of people, and we could use those metrics to create road safety relevant profiles of the individual types of person. And I'd like to share with you a couple of examples of those now. So I'm just going to share my screen. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is the standard. Which window do I want? I want that one. This window that we're looking at now is showing you the standard profile that Acorn supplies for every one of the 60 odd types of household which they include in their socio-demographic classification. And this is very similar to the kind of thing that those of you who've used Mosaic before will be accustomed to see. So you can see you've got a name, you've got a picture, you've got the characteristics in terms of the property, in terms of the income, in terms of the neighborhood type, and so on. And there's a complete set of these, which of course will be available to everybody who is a MAST user. As part of our license with Acorn, we're allowed to distribute these to people and make them freely available. However, it goes a little bit further than that, because I am now going to share with you uh, an additional feature that we are able to add. Now, this is something that we always wanted to do with Mosaic, but we were never able to do, partly because of licensing restrictions and partly because the way that the metrics were made available to us by the Mosaic system made it very difficult to do. But with Acorn, we have been able to introduce a complete set of road safety relevant profiles that will be available to all MAST users, in addition to the standard profiles that are produced by CACI. Now, what this allows us to do is add our road safety insights into the segmentation that's available. We've gone carefully through the list of all the metrics which one can access about the Acorn groups and types, and we've picked out the ones that seem to us to be of most use to road safety professionals. Now, this is a mocked up sample in Word, because we are still in the process of generating these profiles, and we haven't got them ready for every group and type yet. But these will be released alongside the data release next month. And as I said to Candice earlier on, we will be releasing Acorn at the same time as the 2022 data. So for every group and for every type in the Acorn taxonomy, you'll have available to you a profile like this. So we're covering things like car ownership, type of car, how people travel to work, and obviously this transport to work profile varies a great deal between different community types, and the that will give you a lot of insight into one that this particular group that we happen to be looking at as an example here. A lot of those people commute to work by bicycle. That's a high percentage, and so that will give you very useful insight into the kind of people who are becoming casualties who are from your area. You can see that we also have mileage profiles, insight about vehicle usage, indication of hobbies and which active sport or outdoor hobbies they pursue, which is giving us some sort of an insight into people who cycle, people who walk, people who run, people who jog, and that's exposure. We're able to get some information about electric and hybrid vehicle use, level of education. A very important one we've got here is channel preference, which obviously, as well as giving you a clear idea of what types of channel different types of people prefer to be approached by, the latest version of Acorn actually has several different versions of channel preferences, so that this particular one we've chosen here is receiving information related to local services, but there's channel preference for quite a number of different types of communication, so that you can get a sense of how different groups want to be approached, and therefore how education interventions are most effectively shaped depending on who your target market is, which is very much the kind of thing that MAST is all about. So we feel that these profiles, and I'm sure that the profiles will evolve as time goes on, as people get used to Acorn and realize the additional information which is now available to them as a result of the existence of these. um, we will evolve those to provide information that's as relevant as possible to the needs of our road safety stakeholder community. So that's a sample of the kind of insight that we hope to be able to use Acorn to bring that simply wasn't possible with Mosaic. So that's another one of the reasons why we chose to go over to Acorn. Uh, One other quite exciting reason why we chose to go over to Acorn has got to do with the level of geographic accuracy that it was possible for us to provide within MAST. For reasons of licensing, we were never able to present um, information about Mosaic classifications at any lower level than local authority district. So we had to take an entire local authority district and profile drivers, riders, casualties only at the level of the whole local authority. We weren't allowed to go down to any lower level of geography with the Mosaic classification. We could do that with Stats 19 data, of course, but we couldn't do that with the Mosaic data because the licensing wouldn't allow us. We've managed to negotiate with CACI to allow us to expose Acorn profiling at a lower socio-demographic level. And I'm going to show you a quick example of what I mean by a lower socio-demographic level. And the way I'm going to do that is by using a very useful online tool. If you don't know about this one, well worth bookmarking. It's called Find That Postcode. Yeah. And this is the Find That Postcode website. And I've just put my postcode in there. And I'm going to search for my postcode. You could do this with any postcode. This tool is freely available. Anyone can do it anytime they want. When I search for my postcode, it of course finds my postcode. It would be a bit rubbish if it didn't do that. But the important thing that I want to draw your attention to is the key areas list down the left-hand side of this screen, because what it does is it not only finds your postcode as a dot on a map. um, this means you all know where I live now, so you can come around and get me. There we go. So it not only finds my postcode as a dot on a map, but it also finds my postcode in terms of lots of different geographies that I'm within. And the important one here is middle super output area. I live in a particular area of the delightful market town of Banbury called Easington. Yeah, and you can see that you can find that out, simply put a postcode in and it immediately tells you. And this is what a middle layer super output area looks like. So this is about 1/5 of the town of Banbury. And I live in Easington. I live about there in that particular kind of southwest quadrant of Banbury. And middle layer super output areas allow you to focus on an individual community with quite a lot of accuracy. Previously, if I was in one of your profiles for because I'd been a driver involved in a collision, you would only be able to see look at me at the level of Cherwell District, North Oxfordshire, which is the local authority district I live in. But when we're able to include this feature in MAST, you'll be able to look at the profile of casualties from individual communities. And we're quite excited about the road safety possibilities of that. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to implement that feature in time for the initial release of the ACORN data. So when ACORN is initially released in MAST next month, it will still be at local authority district area, the same as Mosaic was. But this is something that is permitted by our ACORN license. We are currently looking at the development options for how we're going to make this available. And I look forward to, in the foreseeable future, being able to announce that profiling in MAST will go down to community level like this. So that's another exciting reason why we've chosen to swap to ACORN. Um, One last thing that I will say about ACORN, and at that point I'm going to ask if anybody's got any questions or comments that they'd like to make about our socio-demographic profiling. So please put your thinking hats on about that. But I've just got one other thing that I want to mention about ACORN before we move to that. I'm just going to go back to the default profile, the one that's supplied by Kaki to give you insight into ACORN. And you'll notice that this one that we've got here is called 1A1. And that's because in Mosaic, the equivalent thing might have been called A1. But in ACORN, it's called 1A1 because ACORN is a 3-level taxonomy, not a 2-level taxonomy. So not only does every community have a type like this one, high flyers in luxury apartments and townhouses, every type is a member of a group. In this case, the group is called exclusive addresses. This lot are so exclusive they live on a yacht, apparently. Oh, some people, I don't know. And that tells you all about the group that that particular type is a part of. But ACORN has another level of classification above that, which I will show you now. It goes right up to the level of category. And to show you that, I'm going to show you the ACORN page that will be coming in the MAST wiki. It goes without saying, by the way, that we appreciate it will take people a little bit of time to get your heads around the new socio-demographic classification system and to be able to unlock some of the potential that drove us to make this decision to change our provider after 15 years of working with Experian. That was quite a big call, but we're confident it is the right thing to do. And we will, of course, support everybody in doing that by providing a complete refresh of all the pages of the MAST wiki, which currently tell you all about Mosaic, will tell you all about Acorn, will make those profiles, both the standard ones and the road safety ones, fully available to everyone. And we will also, over the course of the next few months, be revamping the online training materials and the MAST curriculum to bring it into line with Acorn as well. So all of that is coming. But just to dwell upon my point about the categories, you can see that this is our draft page in the MAST wiki, giving full information about Acorn. And just like the MAST wiki always did about Mosaic, it shows you a complete list of all the groups that are within Mosaic, within Acorn, and a complete list of all the types that are within Acorn. There they all are. There are 1A1 high flyers there. But we've also got those groups organized into 7 general categories. And it might be that those general categories are quite useful, especially for people who are looking at for a general statement of the kinds of people who are being exposed to different types of road risk without diving into too much detail. And that might also be a useful thing to do if you're looking at a relatively small sample size, where going down to group or type level, the samples at an individual type level would be too small to be meaningful, but the categories give you an opportunity to do so. So that 3-level taxonomy rather than a 2-level taxonomy is another advantage that we felt Acorn offered. So that gives you an idea of what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to convey to you the benefits of that. But this is now an opportunity for you to ask me questions or make suggestions about any of that. So does anybody have anything they'd like to say about sociodemographic classification and about our move to Acorn? Because now would be a good time. Okay, no, that's fine. It's quite a lot of information. Yes, in answer to your question, Candice, yes, absolutely. The data will be indexed against population in exactly the same way that the Mosaic index was. The reason why we haven't been able to introduce the middle layer super output area exposure just yet is because we're still in the process of development of making sure that our indexing system will work correctly at that lower level of geography, which is a little bit involved, and we're putting in the work to make that happen. But yes, absolutely, indexing by population will still happen, and it may be that we will be able to index by other Acorn metrics in the future as well, by annual mileage traveled, for example. That is something that we're investigating as well, and that may be another collateral benefit of this change. Anybody have any other questions about Acorn? Because obviously this is the big development in MAST this year. Okay. We will move on from that. One last thing I will say, if anyone is currently using Mosaic indexing or in MAST, then you'll need to know this. For licensing reasons, we will, of course, have to cease supporting Mosaic in MAST. That's a necessary corollary of moving from one provider to the other. The dimensions that describe drivers and casualties in terms of Mosaic groups will disappear from MAST at the end of this year. So if you do plan to do any last work on classifications in Mosaic, then I would suggest that you do so sooner rather than later. Did anybody just stick up their hand, or did I imagined that? Right. Do feel free to stick up your hand and interrupt me, by the way, even if I appear to be in full flow. I shan't be in any way offended. I would much rather you interrupted me than died wondering. But yes, so Mosaic will be disappearing from MAST by Christmas at the latest. So if you need Mosaic indexing, particularly perhaps if your authority is a Mosaic customer, then act now while stocks last, just in case. But we are confident that the support we'll be able to give to the road safety community going forward using Acorn will be better than what we could have achieved with Mosaic, regardless of whether you are an Acorn customer within your organization or not. And that was one of the key reasons why we wanted to make this move, to make it more useful for everyone. Okay, so that's enough about that. Oh, Candice has thought of another question. Will there be Mosaic information for 2022 data or just the historic? Now, it's a very good question, Candice. The answer is yes, I will. I will associate the 2022 data with Mosaic. I will have to do that based on the 2021 Mosaic implementation because I don't have updated data for Mosaic. But yes, I will update the 2022 data with Mosaic, but it's only going to be there until Christmas, and then it will disappear because our license will no longer be covered. So that's the answer to that question. I will do, but it won't be there for long. Okay, so let's move on now and talk about the next item on Steve's agenda. which is about best practice. Now, I've got a topic that I'd like to raise and point out to everyone, which is something that we cover in MAST, which is going to become, which is already a topic of concern to many, and is going to become an unavoidable bigger topic of concern for everybody over the course of the next few years. This is something I'd like to demonstrate to you actually in MAST so you can see where it sits and how it's implemented. I'm happy to be interrupted and ask questions about it. And after I've done this, I'll give people an opportunity to say um, how they use MAST either to address this question or any other similar question. But I'm going to share my screen and do a little bit of the demo. So here we are in MAST, and I'm going to log on using this default account. Now, as many of you will be aware, um, pardon me, as many of you will be aware, the way that injuries have been recorded in Stats 19 has been steadily changing over the course of the last several years as a result of the rollout of crash through many of Britain's police forces. The majority of police officers are now recording casualties not in terms of the traditional fatal, serious, slight three-way division, but in terms of what injury a casualty actually suffered. Now, this has two advantages. One is it allows them to multi-select if more than one thing happened to a casualty, which will allow us in the future to get better understanding of trauma to different parts of the body that apply to different road user groups and different casualty groups, which has got the potential to be very powerful and is something that we very much hope MAST will be at the forefront of exposing. The other reason why that's important is because it means that the severity of the casualty is no longer determined by the officer. Rather, the severity of the casualty is determined by the system. It looks at the lists of injuries that the officer ticked and it decides on the basis of the injuries that were ticked, which is the most appropriate level of severity to assign to that casualty. And it was discovered, as many of you will probably know, that when this system first started to be introduced, and that's going back about 6-7 years ago now for some police force areas, and it's been gradually filtering its way in ever since then, is that when you ask officers what was wrong with someone, you tend to get more serious injuries reported than you did when you just asked them to choose between a box called serious and a box called slight. Yeah, it's the old thing of what answer you get to a question depends on how you go about asking the question, as any good politician knows and as any good interviewer knows even better. It's true in road safety as well. Now, the implications of this are shown in MAST in two different ways. And the reason why I've chosen this as a best practice thing to talk about in this meeting is because this is now unavoidable for everyone. There are still quite a number of police forces who haven't started using injury-based reporting yet. And so their data is still being collected by an officer ticking serious or slight. But what's going to happen as soon as you start using injury-based reporting in those areas is you're going to get a sudden uptick in serious injuries and therefore an uptick in KSIs. And therefore, if you are working off any targets or baselines that are based on a baseline period in the past, you're no longer going to be comparing like with like unless you take that fact into account. And injury-based reporting is going to become compulsory as soon as the new Stats 19 comes into force on the 1st of January next year. So that means that in 2 years' time, when the 2024 data is released in the September of 2025, everybody will have injury-based severity reporting and everybody will probably have experienced that uptake in serious casualties. So there is no longer any escape from this. It's no use saying, oh, our force doesn't do that, so I don't have to worry about it. everybody's to some extent got to worry about it. And even people whose forces went over years ago still have to think about it, because they have to think about their baseline periods and their targets and how those are adjusted and recalibrated. So the first thing that we've done on the dashboards tab of MAST is we've added a dashboard that will, excuse me while I scroll through all these to find the one I want. There we are, a dashboard, that one there, called the Severity Adjustment Dashboard with Highway Authority Filters. And that allows you to see the impact of injury-based severity on an area by area basis, and also on a road user group by road user group basis, if that's what you want to see. So I'm just going to launch that dashboard, and everyone's got this, by the way, on their dashboards tab in MAST. This is universally available to all MAST account holders. So this is what it looks like. There's a page of gubbins there. So if you need to copy and paste some text to explain to people what injury-based reporting is all about, feel free to pinch that text. That's why it's there. Let me go on to page 2. And this is injury-based reporting. And you can see that chart along the side here. The upper line is the adjusted KSIs, and the lower line is the reported KSIs. So that lower line is the number of killed and seriously injured people that were reported in the past before injury-based reporting was a thing. But as soon as we realized that, as soon as you started doing injury-based reporting, you got a higher number of serious injuries, there had to be an adjustment for that. So what the DFT now do is, every year when they release the stats, they also release an individual casualty and collision level adjustment, which is basically the percentage chance that something was reported as a slight would actually have been a serious if injury-based reporting had been in place. Yeah. And you can see the difference that that makes. If we go back as far as 2006, so beware anyone who's using a 2006 to 2010 baseline, because this is you. You can see that the total number of reported KSIs was just under 32,000, but it's likely that the actual number was close to 46,000 once you take account of the difference caused by injury-based reporting. You can see that over time, those lines are getting closer and closer together. And the reason for that is that gradually, since 2015, more and more forces have been adopting injury-based reporting on a piecemeal basis, mostly because that's when they adopted crash and started using crash. And the big movements together, particularly, came when the two biggest forces, the Metropolitan Police and Police Scotland, respectively, started using injury-based reporting. As a result of that, the difference between reported KSIs and adjusted KSIs is much smaller now. It's only about 3,000, but it's still important that we take it into account. And the upper line is reality. And the bottom line is what we fondly believed reality to be before the statistical adjustment was taken into account. So let's have a look at a specific example. I'm going to take as an example Birmingham, mainly because it's conveniently close to the top of the alphabet. But of course, this dashboard allows you to multi-select any combination of highway authorities that you like. I'm going to choose Birmingham. So there we are. And there's the situation in Birmingham. You can see that there's a point when those two lines converge, and that point is 2016, which is the first year when West Midlands Police were always using injury-based reporting. And at that point, of course, the statistical adjustment becomes unnecessary. But you can see that for a number of years before then, there was a significant difference between the reported number of casualties and the adjusted number of casualties. And having this allows you to take your area, know when that point of convergence came for you. And of course, that point of convergence will only be present if your force has gone across to injury-based reporting, and also to see what the figures are that you should be using if you need to do baselines based on past performance. You should be using the upper line, not the lower line. Now, to further support you in putting this into practice in MAST, We've because obviously that dashboard is great for giving you a general overview of the numbers, and it does allow you to filter by individual road user type. So for example, if I click on pedal cyclists, there are the Birmingham pedal cyclist casualties with that adjustment taken into account. And it does allow you to filter. So if I wanted to see pensioners, I could do that, and there we are. We've got people aged 65 and over, casualties aged 65 and over, with the adjustment taken into account. So it is possible to do a little bit of work that's useful within that field. But if I go back to the MAST portal, we've introduced a whole MAST that allows you to do anything you want with those adjusted collision and casualty figures, and that is what MAST data mods is for. MAST Online and MAST Data Mods, by the way, both contain the same base data. They've both got in them exactly the same data that's underlying reported road casualties Great Britain. So any number that you get out of MAST Online or MAST Data Mods gives you exactly what reported road casualties Great Britain would tell you if it was available to this level of detail. So I'm going to go into MAST Data Mods. The difference between them is that MAST Data Mods fully exposes all of the adjusted collision and casualty totals. So if you need to recalibrate a baseline or anything like that, you've got the detail at your fingertips, and you don't have to mess around with the individual collision level percentage adjustments, which, believe me, is a pretty fiddly business. Basically, we've done that hard work so that you don't have to. Two very useful reports that we've added in here as templates. We've got an injury-based reporting system. If you're not sure about when and to what extent injury-based reporting was included in a particular area, this is a very useful one for you. If I just open that one up, I'm going to stick with so here's a MAST report that shows you the difference between um, uh, fatal and serious casualties that were reported under an injury-based system and those that were not, so that you can see how the change pans out. You can see what percentage is being reported in that way. And you can find out when that change first impacted your area by using a simple location filter on this report. So I'm going to filter, for example, for West Midlands Police, since I just picked on, there they are, West Midlands Police, since I just picked on Birmingham. If I do that, we can see the onset of injury-based reporting as it happened in West Midlands Police. Notice that the fatalities, which are those light-coloured ones at the top, don't change. Dead is still dead. A killed casualty is still killed. This has no effect on fatalities. It only affects the difference between serious and slight injuries. And you can see there that in 2014 and report before, there was no injury-based reporting in West Midlands Police. From 2016 onwards, all the serious injury severities have been reported in West Midlands Police, and there was a year of changeover when some of them were, but most of them weren't. And this is typical. You know, most police forces don't change their IT systems like magic on the 1st of January. It's going to happen at some point through a year. And this report allows you to identify when and to what extent that happened in a particular police force area. If I swap to grid view here, I can show you how that pans out in detail. And you can see that you've got a breakdown of the exact number that were and were not reported in injury-based reporting. Okay, so I've got one other one that I quickly want to show you before we move on to seeing what else we've got to talk about. And that is the time series with severity reporting adjustments. This report is basically the same thing as you saw in the dashboard we looked at a moment ago, but of course, being a full feature, full fat MAST report, you can add to it any combination of filters or series adjustments that you want to. So there you can see that national line with the adjusted and the reported casualties getting closer and closer together. just to follow through in our example, I'm going to filter for Birmingham. So if I drill down and find Birmingham, there it is, there we go. And again, you can see that those two lines come together in 2016, which is exactly the same thing that we saw on the dashboard. But because I'm in full feature MAST now, I'm going to go into grid view to show this. There's lots of things that I can do. First of all, I might want to see how that breakdown has affected serious and slight injuries separately. And the way that this is implemented in MAST data mods is on the columns tab using the measures dimension, which if you've used MAST before, you've probably always just ignored it and thought, oh, I just leave that there, it looks after itself. But actually in MAST data mods, it's got a job, because if I click on its filter button, it gives me a list of different totals of those adjusted severities that I can show. So for example, I can show reported and adjusted crashes that are serious, and reported and adjusted crashes that are slight. So I can actually see a complete breakdown of the effect of applying the statistical adjustment. Yeah. So we can see that if I look at the more recent years, there is no difference between slight reported and slight adjusted, because we saw that in 2016 and before, all of West Midlands Police had been adjusted and we didn't have to worry about it. But if I go back to 2015, I can see that there's a small difference between the reported number of slights and the adjusted number of slights. And the reason for that difference is because a certain number of those slights have been promoted, if you like, to serious. So you can see that rather than having 402 reported serious, I've got about 424 statistically adjusted serious. And you can see that that difference gets bigger and bigger the further back we go. You'll notice that these always add up. If I add together the adjusted serious, sorry, that's it there. If I add together the adjusted serious and the adjusted slight, I will always get the same as if I add together the reported serious and the reported slight. Yeah. The total is always the same. What's changing is the distribution between slight and serious. And if a lot of what you do is predicated on KSIs, then that difference makes a big difference. So because this is MAST, I can say, right, okay, I'm only interested in collisions involving a pedestrian casualty, for example. So all I have to do is turn that filter on and boom, I've got that exact same breakdown, but only for pedestrian casualties. If I needed to see that broken down in a different way, let's say, for example, that I wanted to see it broken down by days of the week, I can just add that onto my columns tab, and I've got my breakdown by days of the week. That would look better if days of the week was at the top. There we go. So there's my weekday breakdown. There's my weekend breakdown. And this being MAST, you could carry on adding new dimensions and new filters to break down the data exactly as you wanted, exactly as you need to in order to recalibrate your baselines or whatever it is you need to do. And all the tools are there for you in MAST data mods. We've done data grunge so that you don't have to. Okay, so that's my chosen point of best practice that I felt was a worthwhile thing to add. Does anybody have anything that they would like to ask or say either about that or about any other aspect of using MAST that you'd like to ask about or comment about? Because this is an opportunity so to do. Or have I just battered everyone into helpless silence? Okay, so I'm going to gamble on that silence, meaning that that people feel like they now know something about MAST data mods and severity adjustment, and the fact that you can use MAST as a tool to check that out. You're glad you enjoyed that little tour, Paul. And I will say, not only for Paul's benefit, but for everyone, if you haven't looked at MAST data mods before and you know that you're going to have to come to terms with severity adjustment, MAST is a very useful tool for doing it, but it can be a bit confusing. And similarly, we appreciate that Acorn is quite a big change for MAST users, and you may have some teething issues with getting a handle on demographic profiling using that different tool. If you would like to get in touch with us directly, then please feel free to do so. I am Bruce at roadsafetyanalysis.org. Drop me an email, ask me a question, and I will be happy to try and help you to make sure that you are getting the right numbers out in the right way. Because that kind of support is part of what we're all about, and that support is very important to us. We will get all the online materials and the MAST curriculum updated to take account of Acorn as soon as we possibly can, but that is going to take us a couple of months to get round to. It may be Christmas time or so before we've got the MAST curriculum updated. Please bear with us while we're doing that, but we haven't forgotten about it. At some point, Steve will trap me in a room and point a camera at me, and we will get all of that online material updated. And of course, that we will make sure that is CPD accredited as well, because we know that that's important to people. Okay, so that's much of the ground that I wanted to mention about what's hot and what's important in MAST at the moment. So, Steve, we're going to move on. Just talk about the knock-on effects of some of the things we've been talking about in other products. I think you were going to mention area profiles.
Yes, please. I did see a hand pop up. Candice, was that a stray hand, or was your question answered?
My hand's not up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought I saw a hand pop up. Okay. Yes, just moving on to just talk about area profiles. So the update to Acorn obviously has an effect on a number of the other things that relies on the data that comes out of MAST. The area profile, which is one that I think certainly a few people are familiar with already. The area profile uses data which comes from MAST and heavily relies on the socio-demographic data which comes out of the which currently comes from Experian, but will be moving to Acorn. So that obviously has an impact on how these reports will come out or how it will profile those groups of people that appear. Sorry, Bruce, I didn't quite have my slide ready. Let me just open this up now. There we go. Right, sorry, it's still showing me that people's hands are up. I don't quite know what's going on. Right, just to give you an overview of what the area profile is or how it does it, we take data out of MAST and effectively analyze it in certain ways, looking at both residency and network. So this is produced in a report, or we do have we can also present it as a dashboard as well, which I think Bruce will show you in a second. We also take the data, use it for benchmarking. So either by comparative authorities, there is a methodology for figuring out comparative authorities, or neighbouring authorities, as well as regionally and nationally. So you can see what your local performance is based against those benchmarks. Analysis is done by vehicle mode, or not vehicles, but include pedestrian, motorcyclists, car driver. Each of those can be looked at and analysed individually. All of that is backed up through the socio-demographic insight. The other things that we also look at in there are trend analysis, but also looking forward to projections. So actually looking further ahead. Obviously, that does come with a certain amount of error, but that is also included in the reports as well. Just to show you, we do have the images on screen there of sort of what a standard report looks like. But if I hand back to Bruce, who will be able to show you are we going to have a look at the dashboard?
I will. I'll show you both a report and a dashboard. Great. I thought I would do so. Basically, the idea behind an area profile is we do every possible report that you could possibly do in MAST for you and present it to you in a published format, so that you don't have to, first of all, do the work, and secondly, you've got the ability to present it with a certainty that it's all been done in the way that you would wish for it to be done. So as Steve said, there's basically two options for how this kind of thing can be done. And this is an example of one of our old area profile documents. Now, of course, our area profiles need to reflect the two important trends that I talked about earlier on in this meeting. The fact that we've chosen to go to ACORN means that our area profiling and all of the casualty profiling and so on that we do in insight studies will all go across to ACORN. So it will be following MAST in that regard. And of course, it will have to take account of injury-based reporting and the statistical adjustment of severities, which is another way in which area profiles are keeping up with the times. But an area profile document gives you massive amounts of stuff. There's a table of contents of one example. I think this one's for a London borough. It gives you an idea of the extent and detail that we provide when we generate an area profile. But the key thing is we start it off with an executive summary, and the executive summary hasn't been written by AI or anything. It's written by actual intelligence. So this is based on a human road safety professional going through your data and picking out the most important headlines and the most important trends to give you a quick summary, which is an ideal to base a strategy on. So that's kind of the first thing to say that we provide. Just to give you a rough idea of what you get, there's an example of Steve was saying that comparison is a very important part of what's in an area profile. That's an example, and essentially what we've done there is we've done MAST analysis not only on your area, which is shown by one tulip on that chart, but also on the whole of Britain, on the whole of your region, and on a series of other areas which are comparable in various different ways to your area. And we don't dictate those to you. We discuss and arrange what those comparators are going to be on an individual basis with every commission. So that's how the comparisons are carried out. We also, of course, provide detailed maps showing distributions of things. That's just one example as well. And that will also include socio-demographic distribution of casualties, so that you can see how different types of casualties and different groups of casualties are distributed across your area. One other thing that it's worth mentioning is that we can also include, for public sector clients, contributory factor analysis trend. That's an example of speeding in Hounslow, where something very interesting has happened to their reporting. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but that's an example of the level of detail that it's possible to go into, and you can see that this report is over 100 pages. If all of that is a little bit much, then, as Steve said, an alternative way we can deliver, and we can do an either or here, is that we can also look at the outputs of an area profile as and I'm just lost my link. There it is. As an example of an online dashboard. Now, people often like the information presented in this manner. So let's just have a look at a few pages of an area profile dashboard. So you get a breakdown of all resident casualties, and obviously that's filterable by year, filterable by age group, and these are point and click charts, so you can filter on people there. I'm filtering only on casualties who come from a neighbouring authority compared to only casualties who are actually residents of the authority that you're in. That importance on residency, of course, is one of the main reasons why MAST exists. It's based on the postcodes of every driver, every rider, every casualty nationwide, so you can get a clear idea of your import and export of casualties, as it were. Who's coming, who are residents of your area, what's happening to residents of your area in other areas, what commuters are bringing in with them, and what's coming from people who have come in from further afield. So that one, for example, is non-adjacent authorities broken down by casualty there. And you can see there's a whole bunch of pages here that basically match the sections in your area profile. So if you read in the executive summary, oh, pedestrian casualties were an issue, you go, all right, page 36. Okay, so that's the overview of pedestrian casualties. Now I want to go and play. You can then go to your dashboard and you can play with your dashboard to try and get better insight. And here, of course, is an example of something that over the course of the ensuing months we'll be changing in order to make sure that area profiles stay in line with MAST. We'll be reorganizing these so that they use the mosaic groups and the MAST groups and types, the acorn groups and types is what I was trying to say, the acorn groups and types, rather than using the mosaic groups and types, which is what mosaic is what those letters are. So we've got obviously casualties by mode, we've got vehicle users, we've broken down collisions, contributory factors. You get to choose what contributory factors you want to appear in here, and we'll give you the full breakdown on them. And this, of course, allows for the fact that more than one contributory factor can appear in the same collision. And so, you know, we've taken account of all that kind of thing when we did the analysis so that you don't have to. So an area profile dashboard is another way that we can present that. And you can think of that, if you like, as being a collection of MAST reports that we've pre-prepared for you. The same idea as the headliners, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, that you will have specific to your area and specific to road user groups in your area on the dashboard tab of MAST. I'm sure most of you are familiar with those. The area profile dashboard is the same idea, but just carried to the nth degree. Okay, so that's what I was going to say. Have you got anything else you need to add about area profiles, Steve? I think that gives people an idea of what's
nothing else for
in
me.
them.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okie doke. So in that case, shall I move on to any other business?
Please,
Okie
yes.
doke. So I do have one item of any other business, and then I'm going to invite anyone else who would like to ask a question about anything connected to MAST or the data that underlies it. And I'm always happy to deal with those questions. Indeed, it's sometimes difficult to stop me. So do feel free to ask a question if you like. But I've got one piece of any other business that I would like to draw to people's attention while I've got the opportunity. And that is another thing to do with the imminent change to the new Stats 19 that is coming in January 2024. Another one of those inescapable things that is going to happen to us all, whether we like it or not. And that is that our old friends, the contributory factors, those things that we were just looking at, forming an important feature in an area profile report, contributory factors are going to go out of scope. They're going to no longer be supported as a part of Stats 19. But that's not because collision causation has been abandoned. Quite the reverse. It's because they're going to be replaced by something better. They're going to be replaced by road safety factors. Now, the fundamental idea of a road safety factor is the same as a contributory factor. We're looking for the opinion of an attending police officers in what were the most salient factors that contributed to the collision occurring and therefore contributed to the infliction of the casualties, which is obviously an important thing to understand for casualty reduction. But rather than having 77 contributory factors for the officer to choose from, which is what's been the situation since 2006, road safety factors are going to be narrowed down to a much smaller field. There are only 25 individual road safety factors. It was felt when Stats 19 was reviewed that 77 was just too many, that the sheer number of factors from which the officers had to choose was actually a disincentive for the officers to record the information. And obviously, it's a bad idea to have a system that's got disincentives to record in it. It was also felt that some of the contributory factors described things that almost never happened, and therefore they were almost never selected, and therefore the data from them was only of extremely limited use because you couldn't get any useful trend information out of them or anything like that. And the other major issue with the contributory factors was that they were, bless them, devised in the early 2000s when best practice in road safety was in a different place. And it's very important now that we look at all of our data and information and all of our decision-making processes in road safety through the lens of the SAFE system. So we're taking a holistic approach for everybody who's involved in delivering a safe system, and all the factors and agencies that are involved are accurately represented in the way that we handle that data. So road safety factors redesigned the contributory factor concept to make it safe system appropriate, and to make it less overwhelming for the officers, to reduce burdens and improve the quality of reporting. And that's meant that 77 factors are going to suddenly go down to 25 factors on the 1st of January. Now, ultimately, of course, that's going to have an effect on MAST, because MAST Professional contains all that historic contributory factor data going back to way back when, a gazillion years ago. And it's going to, is it 36? I had 25 in my head. I might be wrong, Candice. I am happy to stand corrected. I am not speaking from notes. I am speaking extempore. So I am happy to be corrected. There is a list in existence, and that is something that I can check for you. But it's definitely a lot less anyway. So the question that we're ultimately going to be faced with, and everybody who deals with road safety statistics is ultimately going to be faced with this, but it's going to happen in MAST when we get to the September of 2025 and we have that first full year of data where officers have been reporting road safety factors rather than reporting contributory factors. What do we actually do with this information? How do we handle it? Now, basically, there are three things that MAST could do, and this question doesn't only apply to MAST, it probably applies to the way that many of you use the data internally in other ways as well. So basically, what can you do? Well, one, you can use contributory factors up to the point when they die, and then from that point onwards, start using road safety factors. Or you can rely on road safety factors only and go, contributory factors are old hat, they don't really translate across, we're just going to abandon them. Or you can go, well, most of the road safety factors map onto an old contributory factor. So we could take that old contributory factor data and map it onto the new road safety factors, which would give us a trend going back in time of road safety factors based on the presumption that we can reasonably accurately and with certainty relate one to another. That wouldn't be a perfect one-on-one correlation, and not necessarily all of the factors, not necessarily for every contributory factor would it be clear which road safety factor it best ought to be associated with, but there is a recommended list that will be published that should in principle make it possible to do that. What you will probably find is that there will be more other factor things getting recorded because a few of the contributory factors just won't map reliably onto a road safety factor. So MAST is going to have to make this choice, and therefore it affects people that use MAST. And it affects the way that our profession operates more widely. So I'd be interested to know, and I don't know if this is something we could do a quick Mentimeter on, Steve. Whether, sorry, I should have given you prior warning on that. That was incredibly unfair. But you know, Steve's known me for a long time. I'm sure he was expecting me to do something terrible to him.
Well, we can give it a go, Bruce.
We can give it a go. Okay, so here are three options. Would you rather abandon contributory factors and just stick to the new road safety factors? Would you rather have the old contributory factors and the old road safety factors stored separately and you work out what to do when it comes to the join? Or would you rather have the old contributory factors mapped onto the road safety factors, so road safety factors are being extended back in time, so at least you've got some kind of a time series for road safety factors, even though the mapping isn't perfect? So those are the options, Steve. Give up on CFs, keep CFs and road safety factors separate, or do the mapping to create the trend. And I'd be very interested to see what people feel at the moment would be the best way to handle this crossover. This isn't set in stone at the moment. This is merely, there we are. Okay, well, somebody's voted already. My goodness me. So yeah, please feel free to vote. Please feel free not to vote. This is just getting an idea at this point. But at this point in a year's time, at next year's MAST user group meeting, we're probably going to have to make a firm decision about this. And in 2 years' time, I will be implementing whatever that firm decision is. So at some point, it's got to happen. And this would also be very interesting because it'll affect the way that people generally use contributory factor data and how that happens. Oh, that's interesting. So I'm getting a reluctance of people to go, do you know what? This is a brave new world. Let's forget history. People don't fancy that option. But some people would feel more comfortable keeping them separate. A majority at the moment, but not an overwhelming majority, feeling like that they would quite like to do that mapping process. And now that mapping process is something that we could build into MAST potentially come 2025, and something that I imagine many of you will be building into your systems in the meantime. But that's helpful to have that idea. If anybody else wants to chuck in a vote at this point, please feel free to do so. But that's useful because that's giving me a sense that there is substantial interest in doing that mapping process, but there are some few people who feel that they would like to have access to the CF separately. It's possible, by the way, that we may be able to have our cake and eat it here. But I can't promise that at this stage. We need to work out how everything is going to work out with the data. But it's possible that that cake can be had and eaten. But thank you very much for giving me a view on what people think about that. And thank you, Steve, for making up so there's an advert for Mentimeter. It's possible to do it quickly.
Sorry about the spelling error, though. it was done quickly.
Yes, no, I think under the circumstances, everybody's going to forgive you for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the road safety factor question before we move on from it? Okay. Right. Well, that was very helpful, and that was the only item of AOB that I had. I wanted to flag that issue up and get a sense of which way the wind was blowing, and that will help us in our long-term planning for 2 years' time when this thing becomes inescapably real. So I guess that brings us to any other business. So if anybody has any questions or comments that you'd like to make about MAST, or Stuart, a very good question. Immediate AOB. Yes. Stuart asks about collision types in MAST. Yes. Now, this is something that we have been in an analysis that we have done in association with the Road Safety Foundation for the last several years now, which takes the details of a Stats 19 collision and using an analytical process rather than people individually reading collisions, it assigns a collision type to every individual collision, and the Road Safety Foundation publish information about different collisions on different routes as part of their annual Eurorap process. Many of you will be familiar with the output in that, and it has been a long-standing ambition of mine to include that in collision type and MAST, and this is something that I've talked, I know, to you about, Stuart, in the past. I am still hopeful that we will be able to do that, yes. But I've just had, but I've got to move the system over to Acorn as well, and I just hope that I will have time to do so. But yes, I am still planning to add collision types into MAST as part of this year's update. That is my intent and ambition. If I might throw that one back at you, Stuart, if you'll forgive me. You're welcome. If it was a choice between MAST being a week later, the update being a week later, or not having collision types, what would you vote for?
For me personally, I'd be quite happy to wait another week, but yeah.
Okay, no, fair enough. Yeah, oh, well, Candice agrees with you. There we go. Okay, so that is something that people rate quite highly. Can I just get a quick show of hands? How many people think that they would use collision types, head-ons, runoffs, and so on? If that was available as a MAST dimension, please stick your hand up. That would be. Oh, there's a forest of hands. Okay, right. Okay, and can I now ask you to can everybody who just put their hands up, put them back up? So we've got all the hands. So this is the hands of people who would use collision types in MAST. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay. So that's about nearly half the people we've got here think that's something that they would be likely to use. So can I now ask you, if those 7 people who've currently got their hands up, put your hand down if you would feel like you wouldn't want to wait an extra week for it because you'd need to get the information right now. Nobody's putting their hand down. Okay, so that seems pretty clear that collision types are popular. I have to juggle quite a few things in the update this year because of Acorn, and okay, no, that is duly noted. Collision types is something that we will do. So thank you very much for raising that, Stuart. Much appreciated. That was a very good AOB. Okay, does anybody else have any other business that they'd like? Yeah, Anka. Hi there. Anka, have you got your hand up for an AOB, or
yeah, sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
you forgot you were still voting on collision types. You're keen on those, are you?
Sorry.
Fair enough. No, that's all right. There's the tricksy things, these hands, aren't they? Does anybody have any other business about suggestions or comments or nice to haves that they would like to see in MAST? No, okay. Well, thank you for that. If anything occurs to you, please don't hesitate to email me. I am bruce@roadsafetyanalysis.org. Feel free to drop me an email with your thoughts, comments, wish list, complaints, questions, or help, how do I do this queries, and I'll be happy to help you out. There are our email addresses, and the Agilysys support email address. Of course, you can always do that, and our staff will pick that up. So please feel free to get in touch with us if you want to. And it's now 28 minutes past 3, so we have come in bang on time. How about that? Thank you all very much for listening. I hope you found that a useful experience. And with that, I'm going to bid you all farewell.
Thanks all.